What year would we be at now, do you think? 80?
I'd say 85, 86.
Yeah.
I came back to Manchester, and it was literally, where do I start, you know? And I went straight back to working in a club. I met Phil Clegg, who was one of the owners of the bars that I worked for, Heroes. And I just happened to bump into him, and he said, come and work for me. And then I went to work in Napoleon's, and then someone told me about a job at Applejack's,
Yeah.
which was, you know, one of the best clubs of its time. And I got down there, and eventually I ended up running the floor, hosting. All these skills taught me to where I was to go in the future. So things like Barabacco under J.W. Johnson's, the idea from that came from the jazz club, the Bluebird of Paradise, that I worked in at night in Ann Arbor. So the concepts were always in the back of the head.
Yeah.
So when they opened up Barabacco Jazz Club, it was a case of, I know how to do this. All you need to do is you need a space for musicians. You need to get good musicians. And I always wanted singers, and that was the hard bit in jazz. I found it very hard to get. And if they were blues. And I wanted things a bit more funkier, but I'm moving slightly ahead. So I came back, worked in Napoleon's, went over to Applejack's, and was also working at daytime in the shops. So I was working for Peter. I did so much then. Like, helped set up the design centre in the Royal Exchange.
Yeah.
That was a really, really good experience. I started choreographing fashion shows here. Started building up a bit of a name for myself. And then when we got the Emporium shop that was on Deansgate, it was one of the main shops at the time. And I got a 10% working share. I didn't own it, I got a 10% working share. But was given the chance to buy the clothes. And so it had to be about your vision. And I worked with a lad called Graham, who had a really, really good eye on fashion, and a girl called Kasia. And we built up the reputation of that shop. But it was the 80s, there was a recession coming in, and we could see what was happening, and eventually we knew that we couldn't last. They would put the rates up on the shop, the leasing rates, and it was just a case of, it was time to get out.
And that's where, like, as I've gone along, like, some of the black people I've spoken to, they say that we really looked up to Bill.
Yeah.
And Tim Williams gave him a shout out. He said that about you as well. And I think some people knew you. They may have first got to know you from that clothes shop.
Yeah. Well, I had, you know, I mean, obviously I'd worked in Jonathan Silver's, but the clothes shop itself really drew people in.
Yeah.
And it all fitted into, like my first experience of the Hacienda, as I was saying to you. I wasn't dressed for it. I was in like a really smart outfit. And I was doing J.W. Johnson's. I was doing the club in the basement.
When did you start doing J.W. Johnson's?
It's got to be 88, 80.
Was you doing it that long?
Yeah. Because it opened up twice. The first time, because it was Mel and Neil that had it. And it was very, very successful. They decided to open up the jazz club, and I'd been in that night. I'd gone in when there was nobody in there. It was a Thursday night. I just thought, I'll go over something to drink, I'll have something to eat. There was an old guy called Jerome on his guitar, blues singer. There's a guy on piano playing sort of jazz classics. Place was empty, but it was such an enjoyable vibe. And I was like reading things, and I was getting snacks and eating it, and then all of a sudden someone came over to me, it's time to go. And I was like, what? And I hadn't realised I'd been in for 4, 5, nearly 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I just said, I'll be back here again.
Yeah.
Anyway, gradually over each weekend, the place was getting real traction. People were coming in. There was a real buzz about it. And then there was, that was it. We used to do fashion shows at, you know, like Hacienda or at nightclubs or places like that. The Royale.
Yeah.
Hitman and Her. So we'd put like a fashion presentation on, and we used to bring other shops in. And then this one year we decided not to bring the other shops in. We said, why don't you do individual ones where your clients can come in and see your new collections after 6 o'clock and give them a good discount, because it'd get the clothes out, advertised, Where'd you get that from? That's how it worked. And we did one in our shop, kept it really, really simple. And then we organised an after party in J.W. Johnson's. So that's when I met Mel and Neil. And then someone said, you should open up a jazz club, because they had the space in the basement. They said, well, we've thought about it, but we don't know how to do it. We don't know what to do. And someone went, you need to go and speak to him. And that's how that came about. So they came over, arranged to meet them, like a few days later, had something to eat with them, and say, we want to open up a jazz club in the basement. And I went, Bluebird of Paradise straight away. I thought, it's simple, the environment was all wood, it looked, sort of quite Western,
Yeah.
So how can you make somewhere like that become fashionable? Music.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. The surroundings don't matter. And my view was that when we opened it, how we got the name Barabacco, because Barabacco was bar below the stairs. Tobacco, I believe, is downstairs or below. And I thought that's perfect. Bar below. Barabacco.
Yeah.
So it's bar, a bacco downstairs. Perfect name. Then it was everybody wanted like credit card things, so with membership cards, black label. As soon as you say you can have a black label card, it's all down to sort of marketing the place in a certain way. There was a lot of money upstairs, so they started coming down. And I remember there was a sort of like, Manchester's always had a crowd who believed that they shouldn't have to pay to come into clubs.
Yeah.
We'll make your club. And because I'd seen clubs die, like a year, maybe 2 years, they would move on to the next place. They weren't interested in you as a business. And fortunately, Mel and Neil had the same attitude. So I said, look, let's not do an opening night. Let's do a preview. And we'll start on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They did deals with the breweries and for cheap drinks. And then by the Saturday, it was rammed with queues going around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was an instant success. And the people who believed that they should get in, when they turned up, they'd say, and I'd say, you play, you pay. To get good acts on, it was like between £750 and £1,000. And I said to the guys, pay them music union rates. No club was doing that. Pay them what they're worth. When that gets out, all your best musicians say, I want to play there, I want to play there, I want to play there. And that's how we got them.
Yeah.
Then we had Richard Rad, as we called him, brilliant DJ. He was really into New York music, jazz and funk and everything. He just completely changed the place. They had another guy from Sunset Radio, but unfortunately that didn't work out. And I brought Rad in straight away because I worked with him in Applejacks.
Yeah.
So the place just took off. And then with the success of the shop, your profile starts getting higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
And I'd always had this thing where I'd wanted to train as an actor. I'd always wanted to work in television, and had two friends who were quite high up in theatre. One of them was high up in television for Channel 4, The Big Breakfast.
Oh, I love that.
For The Big Breakfast.
Yeah.
Andrew Lowry. And he kept saying to me, you need to be in television, you need to be in television. And again, it was the same thing, you need to be a model, you need to be a model. And I was like, ooh, I don't know about this. Anyway, he sent me for what I would class as what I thought was an audition. It was actually an interview. And I walked in, and at the time, comedy had started in the bar, like comedy clubs. And there was all these comedians sat round, and I'm walking in, what am I doing here? Anyway, it was a guy called Dennis Pennis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The one that was on the red carpet.
Yeah.
And would go up and humiliate a star.
Yeah.
Well, I think his name's Paul Kaye.
Yeah.
And he was in the room with some of the production team. And I walked in, and basically they said, what can you do? And I went, well, I'm not a comedian.
Yeah.
I said, but I know how to get a crowd going.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it happened, but they said, go and wait outside. I waited outside, and then they came out. They sent everybody else off. It was the classic. Right, thank you very much. Can you stay? Went into the room. They said, right, we'd like you to do it. And it was Monday to Friday, 5 days a week. It was 50 quid a night. I was like, where's the big money coming from TV?
Yeah.
And all I had to do was, it was 3 stages, and it was Davina McCall
Yeah.
and Paul Kaye. They were the presenters. Lovely. And they said, what are you going to do? And I said, the best way to do it is like start shouting, jumping up and down. And they brought all these young students in. And it was a case, I told them dead straight, I said, listen, you're in Manchester. It's a Manchester show. There's 3 stages. Run to one stage. And then as they come to the end, they'll move the camera to the next one with the band. And you've got to run round to fill that space. So there was about 100 kids in there for it. And then it was the people that were performing that night. My favourites were G Ream, you know.
Yeah.
So things can only get better. So that was an incredible experience. I was told by someone that a woman had come down to see me called Danielle Lux, and she thought that I'd be brilliant in television. But then another woman came down who was older, who said I was too aggressive. So again, these things come in front of me, they get taken away. And that's happened quite a lot in my life. On the verge or the precipice of something that was going to be very successful, but then someone would just pull it right from underneath me. And I've always had this view, it's not meant to be. You know, I've had some great experiences. I learned a lot, but it's led me to where I am today.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to say this, I like me. In 1993, I was in Warrington, and Kasia had a shop called DUH, and it was inside a record shop called Hot Wax. So you know Kev Edwards.
I want spinning Monty. Spinning. I'd love to talk to him.
I will sort that out for you.
I think he was people's go-to for soul music when he was spinning in the 80s.
Absolutely. I'll sort that out for you because he's an amazing man.
See, Kevin, if you're watching.
Yeah, Kevin, you've been mentioned.
Yeah.
You can't get out of this.
Yeah.
It might mean us going over to Warrington, though.
Yeah.
But that'll be cool.
Yeah.
So, I've lost my thread of thought.
So you talk about Warrington, and I think I know where
I'm going
to. Yeah.
And I think this really brings everything to where I am today.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I'd done the Friday night, it was a Saturday morning, I'd woken up really, really early, so it was really, really bright in my bedroom. I think I'd left my blinds up and I was wide awake, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to go over to the shop in Warrington. So I got over quite early, the lads were there, so the lads in the record shop were there, the lads that were in, one of the lads that was doing the clothes, they were all having a bit of a laugh, talking about their night before, things like Mr. Smith's. And I just turned around and said, because I could smell booze on the lad that worked for us, and I just said to him, I'm going to go and get you breakfast. You need to eat something, because you stink. So as I'm coming down the stairs and I'm walking to the corner, there's this, like a thud, but, and I just remember seeing these 2 women, one older, one younger, so it's a mother and daughter, in almost like matching outfits, and there was a bin, and I just remember looking up, and all the litter was up in the air, and what was really strange was the sky was like green, and the clouds were going really, really fast. Now I know what that is now, but at the time I didn't know what was going on. And then through that I heard, get down, it's a bomb. And I hadn't hit the corner when I was just about to turn, and there was this horrible thud, and it was outside Boots. And what it was, as we realised later, was that it was a cast iron bin, and the bomb itself had been put in, so that it blew out low, and it was shrapnel basically, and it injured a lot of what I call low-lying injuries. A man came running towards me, an older man, and he said, there's someone really badly injured at the top of the road, and it was going down to where they call I think it's called the Golden it's Golden Centre something. That wasn't quite there then, it was like a little shopping centre, and this person was on the floor. I thought it was a girl because he had quite long hair, and I just suggested, I said, you know, when I checked the vital signs, that I couldn't feel anything, so I just assumed that he'd passed. This man then, there was an Army Navy store, he'd gone to get a sheet to cover him, and they covered him, and then someone said there's somebody else, and it was by McDonald's on Bridge Street, and it was a young boy, and this girl was holding him, and there was a group of girls around him, but I knew straight away he'd gone. So I just, there was nothing I could do, so I just looked at them and I just went, it was obvious. And then I got pulled into Boots's doorway, and there was a good girl called Lynn Antrobus, and she had a major trauma to her ankle. Everything was it was a horrific injury, but she was bleeding quite badly, so it was a case of stem the injury. So I stemmed the injury with a belt, and like when you have to do a tourniquet, it's a case of you can't just lock it. You've got to keep release. Well, I kept release. That's what I was taught, just to release it slightly, so because otherwise it could cause all sorts of problems. It took a long time for the emergency services to arrive. It's almost like they weren't allowed in the town. And what it was Cash's father was he was one of the big bosses at Warrington General Hospital. He was a heart surgeon. Cash had managed to speak to him and to warn him about what had happened. By that time, the services had arrived. I gave them the information on Liz. And then just literally, Cash was on the other side of McDonald's, opposite Boots. And she was just like, come quickly. And she said, come on, let's get out of Warrington. There was no point, the shop was shut. There was going to be no business that day. And we came into town and went out, she said, shall we go to Dimitri's? And went to Dimitri's for something to eat. And a friend that we both had, which was Andy Burns.
Yeah.
Andy phoned my mum up and asked her and said, was Bill there? Because he knew that I was in Warrington at some point. And she said, yes, he's okay. He's all right. He said, how is he? He said, he's fine. So he asked her a question. So what did he say? It was like going into a cinema and watching a gory movie and coming out and going for a pizza. And Andy said to my mum, watch him like a hawk. And it took about between 3 and 6 months for it to rear its ugly head. At the time, I was doing Paradise Factory. I was going out to Flesh. I was going out to Manso's. I was doing Danceteria, Strange Ways. And
A lot of ecstasy.
A lot of ecstasy.
Yeah.
I was in a relationship with someone that was coming to an end. That got quite nasty at the end. And it was like everything was collapsing. The shop was closed down. Obviously, Warrington was ruined in the sense that there was no business in the town. So I just became quite unwell. What also happened was J.W. Johnson's closed down as well. So I had no income stream, nothing coming in. I wouldn't go and claim benefit, and if it wasn't for my mum took me through those times. It got so bad, and these were the two worst experiences that I had, and this is when I knew and understood what psychosis was. The worst one was I was in bed and I had the front room, which is a big room. It's like an old Victorian terrace. So my bedroom was right at the front, the double windows. I'm lying in bed, but there was light coming in, so I would cover my head up. I woke up in a panic attack, but the reason that it was so bad was I wanted to go to the toilet, but the duvet was wrapping around me and getting tighter and tighter. And then I always have white. So the duvet, this knot turned into this really evil face. It was frightening. And I just remember that the duvet was getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And I wet myself. I wet the bed. And I was so mortified at that. Eventually, for some reason, it just stopped. And I told my mum about it. But she could see my decline. And all the signs of paranoia were there. I wouldn't come out when there was a crowd. I forced myself to go into town. And I would walk right in the corners. I had to be able to see into the window so I could see what was around me. I'm very peripheral me, I've always used that. And then on a couple of times when I was out, I got into, I don't fight people, I don't need to. But I lost it one night outside Manso, and it took 5 doormen to hold me down.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were amazing.
Yeah.
Because they knew me and they thought there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
He's not well. And And once I calmed down, I remember I remember being in the air, looking down at myself, and in my head I'm going, "What are you doing? What are you doing? This is ridiculous. Calm yourself down, calm yourself down." And there was that split second where you reconnect. And I just burst into tears. And people knew then that I was ill.
Yeah.
So I had no choice because there was a Dr. Montague, Trafford General. I was referred there. And they basically said that if I didn't come in, so I went in, spoke to them and said, "You don't need hospital, you need therapy." And this is why I'm saying, when I said right at the beginning, things like in the kids' home, things happen to you, like sex abuse. And I thought that I had managed it, that I had dealt with it. When all this started and I went into therapy, what underpinned everything was, I kept saying, "I'm okay. Yeah, I've got over that. It didn't affect me." They knew that it was like lancing a boil. The bomb was the core over the top. And then you work through that, and it's almost like they've taken the scab off. Sorry to use terms like that, taking the scab off. And then all this crap started coming out. And it was literally childhood sexual abuse. So I'm nearly 70 now, so we're going back to when I was in my 50s. It took all that time for me to realise that I hadn't dealt with it. It really had affected me. But it was the best thing that happened. The other good thing that came out of that was that I made a decision to go and train as an actor, and I went to the Arden School of Theatre. I didn't finish the degree, I just went to diploma because I couldn't remember text, and that's drugs. I just couldn't remember, lines, and other students that I was working with would get really, really frustrated. But I learnt the mechanisms of acting, like subtext, working from reading between the lines, developing your character. How do you develop your character? Using an animal, might help. Other references, like your own experiences in life, can inform the character. Owning the product, and that leads later to where I am now. So let's hold that there. So I went to drama school, was with some amazing students, some now very successful, and others have either gone into education or they've just gone into doing other jobs, because that's what acting is. Not everyone's going to be a star.
When did you do the acting? When did you get into that?
So that would have been like 93, 94. So we're heading towards the 2000s.
Because I had a similar where I was doing a lot of drugs, and then I think for a turning point for me was 96, I think. And I did a drama course.
Did you?
Yeah, and then it gave me, I feel like the drugs gave me a lot of confidence, and then they didn't. They just messed my head up, and then the drama gave me another outlet to be confident and to involve myself in and meet people away from that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and what I had to do was, I knew the day when I had to say no.
Yeah.
The only way I could do it was remove myself from the scene.
Yeah.
So I literally removed myself from Canal Street, and I think it was like 6 months. I stayed away from my old friends, and so the question you ask is, fair weather friends, social friends, where are your real friends, especially when you've had a breakdown. And a lot of people really let me down.
Yeah.
But it taught me a lot. It was about how people are. They couldn't deal with it. They'll see a person who is very confident, this character, and then all of a sudden they see, it's almost like everything, the stuff has been pulled out of you, and you're just sort of withering there.
Yeah.
And they don't want to acknowledge that. It's probably too uncomfortable for them. But, like I say, I did the theatre degree, and then they asked me, I already had interest in writing, and they were setting up a new course called Writing for the Stage at Manchester, and one of my tutors said, "We want you to do it. You need to go and start learning how to write." And I walked into this class, and it was me and 8 women. I was so happy. And they were brilliant, their ideas were brilliant, but we worked with brilliant writers. We had like the BBC sort of radio drama came in, and how to write a radio play. And I always said that one day I would do it. To be honest with you, I've not done anything with me acting.
Yeah.
And I am writing, and I like to write verse and poetry. And I am writing, but I do get distracted. So that's something I've got to sort out for myself and work this out. Where does this distraction come from?
Yeah.
And in respect of that, what happened was, through the workshops as an actor, I learnt, oh my God, if I'd have had this when I was modelling at the beginning, I could teach models quick ways in to modelling. And then just by chance, by that time, when all that was over, I went to work for the Priory. I started off as a support worker or nursing assistant. One of the old nurses said to me one day when we were leaving, she was offering me a lift home, and she said, "You remind me of an old-fashioned nurse." And I sort of looked at her and went, "Well, I did train as a nurse." She said, "What in?" And I said, "Learning disabilities and psychiatric." She freaked out. She literally, this is a woman that was, Ollie Barker, I call her, Ollie Barker, Ollie. And she made a phone call to speak to a service manager. She said, "Bring him up now." So it's an old hospital. It looks like a country mansion. Come up the stairs, halfway, we're on a landing. My service manager's there, Ollie's there. And she said, "Tell me what you've done." And I said, "Well, I trained in learning disabilities and psychiatric." I said, "But it was 1978 was when I finished my training." She said, "Right, that's fine. Do you want to do a return to practice?" And they were doing this 1 year course to return back to nursing. So I said yes, obviously. And when they came, that was it. I did the course, but when they tried to find my record, they couldn't find it. And they kept saying, "Bill, they can't find it, they can't find it." It was on bloody microfilm.
Right.
In fact, when they did find it, I spoke to the NMC, and there'd been a note put and said, "This must be one of the oldest return to practice." In other words, like some people might, they have a baby, so they'll lose 5 years, and then they'll come back, and then you have to return to practice, which means you've got to sign off on certain things, even though you've still got all your skills. And she said it's probably the longest one ever that we've found. So I'm quite proud of that.
And to this day now, you're doing nursing, aren't you?
Well, what ended up happening was I went to work for the Priory Group. I left and went into work in rehab, in a rehab hospital. Wasn't very keen on that, if I've got to be really honest. But I worked with some amazing people. And then from rehab, now this is this brings everything to a close almost. In the 1970s, 1972, 1973, I had a friend called Xavier Foley. When he was a student, I'd choreographed his show. He didn't want to do Graduate Fashion Week at Manchester Poly. He decided to do it at Berlin Club. So we did a show down there for him. He moved to London, and then over the years he became very, very successful. Eventually, he had funding in the way that the big fashion houses are. And I'd come to the end of a relationship. My head was in it. That night, that weekend, it was horrendous. And he offered me a job to come and work in London as his PA. Now that was for about 12 months. And in that, I had to coordinate all his shows. So it was like London Fashion Week. It was New York. Although we didn't do Brent Park, there was a show at the British Embassy, and it was for the trading industry. So it was all about exports.
Yeah.
So I did that. Then we went to Milan, we went to Paris, Barcelona, and then Madrid. Got to the end of that, and unfortunately him and I fell out, so I left. So that's when I went to drama school. So it's drama school, then post-grad. Then I went back into nursing. And then and this is why I believe something exterior that's very, very powerful. I was raised by Bernardos. My friend kept saying to me that I worked with, "Why don't you come and work with me, little man? Come and work with me, little man." She kept going on about it, and it was in Whitchurch in Shropshire. And I kept saying, "How am I going to get to Whitchurch in Shropshire? You can get a train." Anyway, one day I decided to go, arrived at the house, walked in. There was a group of women sat around this young man who was in this specially adapted bed. Parents were there. It was almost like they were waiting for me. As I walked through the door, I introduced myself. I said, "I'm Bill." I'll call him Mr. G. I'll leave it at that. Call him Mr. G. Went straight over to Mr. G, started talking to him. There was no response. But I asked about him, and they said that they'd adopted him from Bernardo's. And as soon as I knew that, I just looked up and I went, I'm coming to work here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I stayed with this young man for 11 years.
Yeah.
Going back slightly, if someone turned around and said, what was the greatest moment of your life so far? There's been many. But the one that I will always stick out was when I was in New York. I was in a restaurant called a Marjorie. I was with a guy called Nick Halleck, who was the biggest clothing agent on the East Coast of America. He'd taken David's range, it was a women's range, and some menswear, and we had to sort of put it into the studio because all the big stores were coming in to buy. And he turned around to me and he said, would you like to go anywhere somewhere when you're in New York? And I'd heard about a Marjorie, and he said, gave me the number, phoned it. They said it was like 6 to 8 months before there'd be another seat in there. Turned around, looked at him and said, there's no seats. He picks the phone up from me, says it's Nick Halleck, seat on Saturday night, we get it. So he proved his power and his ego was satisfied. And we went. I was absolutely off my head on booze and other things. Well, another thing. We all were. And all of a sudden, I saw these women and there was this, and it was like, oh my God, someone. And I just saw these women walk back. They were really tiny, really severe haircuts. They could have been wigs. They looked like they were in Chanel suits. They came walking past, really high heels. And then all of a sudden, this huge man in a dinner suit comes walking down. And I looked and I kept thinking Marlon Brando. I don't know why, I just kept looking at him going, Marlon Brando. He comes to the table, he turns, nods to Nick, nods to me and to David. There was a couple of other people with us at the time as well. And then he goes over to this small bar, which is where the cars and the taxis, so someone goes out and gets them. The three women, one of them comes walking across, says to Nick, Nick, have you received your invite? And he said, yes. Would your friends like to come? Mr. Saint Laurent. And it was Yves Saint Laurent.
Was it?
Had invited him. He'd launched a fragrance, and it's being launched on the Statue of Liberty Gardens there. Yeah. And there was a boat to take us down. And I was like, oh my God, it's Yves Saint Laurent. I can't believe this. And again, David and I were not getting on. He looked at me and turned around, well, you're not going. You've got to be back. It's London Fashion Week next Sunday. We were doing the Sunday show, the closing one. Or it could have been the opening one, actually. But anyway, it was a Sunday show. And I just remember being so upset and hurt by that. And I just told him, but basically I turned around and said, the last time you see me, I won't be coming back. And that's when I went to drama school. So that brings that to the end.
Yeah.
And in respect of the nursing, that's really what saved me. Yeah. You know, it was, and I've gone down a sort of like, I use the word spiritual. People talk about spiritual being outside. I don't believe spiritual, in my opinion, is outside. It's inside. Yeah. The answers are inside you. Yeah. You just have to get to them. Yeah. And that's it. And I think this is where it leads me today. And I'm 67. I retired from nursing, but I've still got things that are in the pipeline that are moving. Writing, going into business with someone, which will be happening by September, if it all works out well. And caring for my mother, who's now 91.
So, this has been amazing, Bill. Thanks so much for doing this today with me. I always like to pick a record for my Spotify playlist. And for you, like, I'm going to say, give us a disco track that we should know. Or just a track you love, but I'm thinking disco.
Can I give you three? Because they're three that are really, really important. Yeah. Gino Socchio, Dancer. Yeah. Loving Is Really My Game, Brainstorm. Yeah. And the third one for me would be Cinnamon by Grace Jones from the 1970s. Yeah. There are many, many more, but those three in particular, if they come on for me, you'll just hear a person scream, run to the dance floor, try and dance like he used to, probably end up on the floor like that, needing to be helped up. But
I might play it now and see what happens.
Okay.
So I'll just stop recording now.